I am so excited to introduce this man. I'll tell you a little bit about him. I searched Google last night for some information, because what I find in this work that we're doing in the transdisciplinary nature is the thing that connects us all is dirt on each other. So I Google searched him last night to see if I could find. I found nothing. So which means I have to read what I've been given. So Christian Pohl is the co-director of the Transdisciplinary Network of the Swiss Academy of Arts and Sciences and a core member of the Trans-disciplinary Laboratory at the Department of Environmental Science, System Science with the Swiss. It's wonderful to have you here. We're totally looking forward to this. Get your pens ready for your questions. Okay.
Thank you, Robin, for this nice introduction. As you can see, or as Robin said, I have two affiliations. The one with TDNet at the Swiss Academies, I have since like 10 years when it was created. And most of the work that I will show to you, if it's our work, it was created within TDNet. So what I'd like to do is the first 10 minutes to go into our understanding of transdisciplinary research, and then say a few words about what I mean by heuristics, and then give you some examples of heuristics and principles. First, to our understanding, this is just another definition of transdisciplinary research. It says that transdisciplinary research is done with the aim to frame, analyze, and proceed problems in such a way that the complexity of a problem is taken into account, that the diverse views on it are grasped, that abstract and case-specific knowledge is combined and integrated, and that knowledge and practices are produced that promote what is to be seen as the common good. So this definition is a bit different from the one, for instance, that Merit Polk showed yesterday, where she said, well, for us, interdisciplinarity is the collaboration of disciplines, whereas transdisciplinarity means to include also stakeholders in that. And this is, our definition is different in the sense that ours is written, so our aim, from the perspective of those who do the research. So, for instance, if you know as a researcher that for doing transdisciplinary research you have to include different disciplines and stakeholders, then this is okay to know, but it does not give you any orientation about what disciplines or what stakeholders you should include and for what purpose. And our definition is written in the sense that it gives you an orientation, that you think about what kind of disciplines and or stakeholders do I have to include in order to get the whole complexity of the issue, or in order to get the different viewpoints that are relevant, or in order to combine and connect abstract and case-specific knowledge. And the last point, the orientation towards the common good, with that point we wanted to make very explicit that if you do transdisciplinary research in the sense of problem solving, then you certainly have to be very explicit about the underlying values and norms. It's basically what Gerald Mitchell was talking about yesterday, the mountain in one of his diagrams, I think, was the values. And this says, in our definition, it says very clearly that people who do transdisciplinary research as problem solving, they have to be very explicit about what they mean, for instance, by sustainable development, by public health, or by gender equality. And we don't think that somebody of the team has to know what exactly sustainable development means, but we think that this has to be a product of a negotiation and deliberation among the people that are involved in such a project. So that's the way we try to define it, as seen from the perspective of the researcher, and I think that's very programmatic for the way of how we try to theorize transdisciplinary research, always in the sense that it might or should help researchers to organize transdisciplinary research processes. This is the same picture as Matthias Bergmann has shown yesterday, the transdisciplinary research process. I mean, I just simplified what he showed yesterday. And it's, again, the basic idea. And there will be some repetition with the talk of Matthias, but I think that's okay. We heard so many things yesterday in so dense way that there might be some redundance. It just say this graphic that transdisciplinary research basically aims at connecting two processes of knowledge production. The one is a scientific process of producing new knowledge on, for instance, a sustainability issue, and the other one is a social process of trying to solve a social or a problem in real world. And ideally, transdisciplinary research connects both processes. This is the overlap in the middle of the picture. And this adds new stages of research to a traditional research process, which are problem framing and bringing, how we call it, problem framing, constituting a project team, I think was the term that Matthias used also, and bringing results to fruition. And they use the term transdisciplinary integration. And adding those stages means that also in research funding or in research evaluation, you have to create a space or a place where this can happen. So, for instance, we are funding a program on sustainable development in research teaching at Swiss universities, and people can apply just to do a problem framing. They get like 100,000 Swiss francs, which would be like 120,000 Australian dollars, I'm not sure, just to test an interesting tool for doing a problem framing with different disciplines or including stakeholders. And perhaps at the end of a problem framing, they come to the conclusion that no further research is needed, but political decisions have to be made. And I think that's very important to see these stages as something that, as closed stages that don't have to follow one after the other. It might be that you conclude after the first that this is it, and no research has to be done. And I think that's really what makes a big difference between a usual disciplinary research process and a transdisciplinary one, that it adds these two stages that need brain force and money. Also, I added kind of those two realms to say that those transdisciplinary research processes take place in the overlap of the realm of science and practice. And in the realm of science, it would be all about truth and rigorous methodologies and understanding things. I mean, truth in the sense of truth to the relative to the specific scientific community you're in, and the concept of truth it has. And on the realm of practice, it would be about relevance and designing solutions, and also about the question whether a solution works politically, technically, socioculturally. And as you can see on the graph, both realms overlap in transdisciplinary research processes, so you have to have a lot of deliberation and negotiation whether you would follow either or place more emphasis on the realm of practice or science in your projects. And some of the projects are really close to science, some of the projects are really close to practice. I think also the wicked complex discussion we had yesterday on wicked problems and complex problems can be placed here. I see the wicked problems as a definition of problems from a perspective of practice, and I see the complex problems or the ill-defined problems idea, basically the ill-defined problems idea, as a perspective that comes from science. So they might be well-defined from a specific scientific discipline. So our definition is one amongst others. This is just a map of different purposes that you might follow with transdisciplinary research. And my understanding is that people define and perform transdisciplinary research differently because they follow different purposes by that. And the purpose that we have in mind in this European, German, Swedish, Swiss environmental sustainability context is problem solving, which is here at the bottom on the right. So we came basically out of the environmental movement, and the idea was clearly to support societal problem solving with the kind of research we do. So our main purpose is to support problem solving with our transdisciplinary research. That's also why for us it is so important to include stakeholders in this kind of research. Whereas if you go to the upper left of the purposes, there the main purpose is to come to a really comprehensive understanding of an issue. That's what we call here encyclopedic understanding. And I think it is the science of team science community and the cancer that does cancer research in the US, which is really advanced, did huge steps in advancing this kind of transdisciplinarity in the last years, basically in the US. At the end, they also would like to solve problems, but their main focus is on getting a really comprehensive understanding of an issue. And there are other purposes too. So now let's come to the heuristics. This is not about heuristics. It's about a situation, or it shows a situation that I find again and again since 20 years when I work with researchers that they really don't understand each other, and they don't understand each other's epistemology, as we will probably learn from Michael O'Rourke. And this is not about heuristics, it's about not understanding each other. And I think the whole, why people like Matthias Bergman or us, why we're trying to create methods and heuristics and tools and principles for doing transdisciplinary research, is because we would like to move more faster beyond that point that people don't understand each other. And we are kind of frustrated that again and again we see the same situation. And I think what Michael O'Rourke will present tomorrow goes basically in that direction. It helps people to position themselves. And I think on the one hand side you see books like the one Matthias Bergman presented yesterday on methods of how you could do such things. I stress more on what I call principles and heuristics. Principles are just sentences that say, well, do this and that. I think Gerald Mitchley presented 3 principles at the end of his talk to summarize what you should be aware of if you do boundary setting and things like that. And the heuristics, by the heuristics I mean much more like a set of questions that help you to organize your thinking. So Gabriela Bammer in her new book presents like hundreds of such questions. And yesterday in the workshop with John Young, basically when you went through these questions about stakeholder analysis or his framework, that's a kind of what I mean by heuristics, a set of questions that help you as an individual or as a group to reflect on what basically you want to do. And my Finnish colleagues Petri Tapio and Katri Hutoniemi are preparing a book on such heuristics that will be published in 2014. So now to some of those principles, I have another 3 principles to add, one for each stage of the transdisciplinary research process. This is just something we talked about yesterday several times. It's about if you enter a transdisciplinary research process, first I guess you have to position the different epistemologies behind, and then in the next step I think you have to make explicit the different framings of an issue. In this picture you see the issue of starvation. So different disciplines would frame it as an economy of starvation, as an ethics of starvation, and so on. And different societal stakeholders would have different solutions in mind. So they could do, NGOs could propose a grassroots movement to address the problem of starvation. Business could try to find some ways to make money out of it. And the government might decide to have regulation to fight starvation. So they all have different framings, and in the first stage of problem framing, you have to make those framings explicit. You could use soft system methodology for that perfectly, as Gerald Mitchley showed. And sometimes I try to use it as good as I can, designing a rich picture for that, for instance. An example that was shown also by Matthias Bergman yesterday is this one. It's taken from the handbook, and it shows the result of a brainstorming that a project on fish decline in Swiss rivers did. And fish numbers are declining, nobody knows why. And what they did for the joint problem framing is that they invited all people who have knowledge or might have knowledge about why fish numbers decline for brainstorming on reasons. These are fishermen, these are people from NGOs, from WWF. These are researchers on fish biology, river morphology, people from wastewater treatment, people from electricity use, people from the government side. So they brought all those people together and brainstormed what are the reasons why these fish numbers decline. Then they made this system model, and then in the next step they analyzed arrow by arrow whether they can find any kind of scientific evidence for or against that arrow, or whether they have to do research about that. So that's a way of how you can do problem framing, but there are a lot of other ways. Then the second step of problem analysis here, the heuristics for doing integration would just be to do whatever to explore different ways of integration before you decide which one to follow. And this is taken from a publication I did together with Gertrude Hirsch-Hardorn and Gabriel Bammer and Lore van Kerkhoff, where we just laid out an empty table to say, well, there are very different ways of how you can do an integration. You can do it by collective group learning, so everybody is always on the table and is trying to integrate things. Or you can delegate it to one specific person. Or you can do it by producing a joint product or by producing a joint text. Or you can try to develop shared theoretical concepts. Or you can just try to understand each other's by using everyday's language or whatever. So there are tons of possibilities of how you can do such an integration. And I think Matthias showed a number of them in his book. And this is then what you end up. This is before you do the integration. It's the elephant metaphor, whoever knows. Different people are in a dark room and what they touch is an elephant and they have different associations of what it would be. And then it might end up like this by an integration, so you come to a very interesting idea of how it looks like in general. Again, if you remember the two realms from the scientific realm, it's wrong. The elephant does not look like that. From the practice realm, this might not be relevant. It might be a very helpful integration that you reach here to address a specific issue, because it's just what you need. Then for the last part of the transdisciplinary research process, which is about bringing results to fruition, I think it's very important to always think of this last part as beginning already when you frame an issue, by problem framing, very early in the transdisciplinary research process. And here, the idea is, if you remember the two circles of knowledge creation, it's very important not only to embed a transdisciplinary research project in the state of knowledge in a specific academic field or several academic fields, it's also very important to embed it in the current societal process of solving a specific sustainability issue, for instance. So, and this is basically what John Young talked about yesterday, about how to be very aware of the political or societal context. And this is why we also relate here to the policy cycle that was shown by John Young yesterday. He showed it with all these arrows, tons of arrows, jumping around and connecting everything to everything else. And so this is important because if you find that a problem in society is in the stage of problem framing, then perhaps the knowledge required from the research community is about underlying understandings of what is going on. So there's a lot of basic knowledge that you have to provide. If the societal process is already in developing policies and solutions, then you have to come up with creative ideas about how the problem could be tackled, and so on and so on. So it's very important to identify where the societal problem-solving process is, just to come up with the right kind of knowledge. And this process might take, like, in the case of climate change, I think the problem framing took like 30 years or so. Sometimes they're very slow, sometimes they're very fast. So, and this is my last, second last slide on kind of another principle for how to come to a result that is really used at the end. And it takes up something that was shown by Merit Polk yesterday, so the collaboration with stakeholders, and it just says this is the process of a research project going on. And on the other axis, you see the intensity of collaboration with stakeholders, whether it's you inform them, you consult them, or you try to co-produce knowledge with them. And it just says this is not always the same intensity during the research process. It's very much going up and down. And the principle behind that would be, think of this collaboration as in a functional dynamic view. So not everybody has to be involved at all stages, and you have to be very careful. If you take the time of stakeholders, you have to be very clear in your mind why exactly you need all those stakeholders in one room at that time. And also think of it in a very functional way. So think about why, exactly what I said, why do you need them at that stage? So this would be my conclusion by an overall principle of transdisciplinary research, and that's what I very often find in projects that do not know much about transdisciplinary research. They try to solve kind of all the problems of the world in one project. And this is this pig over there. That is not only a pig, it's also a sheep, and it's also a cow, and it's also whatever. You can use it for everything. And I very often have to say this is okay as a picture, as a goal you have in mind, but it's very important for the specific project that you find the specific potential it has for transdisciplinarity, whether it is to connect to some stakeholders, whether it is to combine different disciplines in a new way. So thank you very much.
That was magnificent, really. Is there any, David, online questions?
Yes, thank you. There's an online comment which has come in from Itsuki Hando. It's a comment. Itsuki writes, each speaker tries to clarify his or her own definition of transdisciplinarity in relation to societal practice. I hope we will be able to integrate the definitions in the end of this conference. A clearer delineation between interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity may need to be addressed. I think that's a comment at this stage.
Would you like to comment on the comments, sir?
Yes,
Please.
if this is possible.
And then I'm going to go out to the group. So you do your thing.
I mean, what is interesting about the transdisciplinary community, if you go for Wikipedia in the English world, it's like there is a big fight since 10 years about what the right definition of transdisciplinarity is. And I don't know, and it says all kind of warnings on the Wikipedia page. Don't trust this page, and their references are needed and all kind of things. And I think this is an expression of the will to have one definition, but I think this is a completely wrong idea. Because who else, if not transdisciplinary people, have to learn to live with different definitions of the same topic? So I think we should get clear, but not about one definition, but about the several definitions that are around.
Please.
Hello, my name is Becky Schmidt from CSIRO. Just an observation, when I work with scientific research projects, there's a fine balance between defining your terms and spending 3 years defining your terms. So at some stage you just need to accept you're close enough, you're 80% agreed on the terminology, and then do what you need to do. That's my observation.
I think that's a good observation.
Go there.
Thank you. I'd just like to add to Becky's comment. Can we take a kind of action research approach and keep talking about definitions, but accept the plurality and just get on and do things? Thank you. Sorry, Jane Holloway from the Department of Defence.
Yep.
Liz Clark from Fenner School at ANU. Thanks for a great presentation, Christiane. I just had a question. I was really interested in your realms. The realm of science, rigour and understanding, and practice relevance and designing. How do you practically bring those together?
How do you practically bring those together? I mean, I guess in the example I gave of the fish net, I think it happens all the time in transdisciplinary research processes that both are brought together. In the case of the fishnet, it was by inviting the people from practice to brainstorm reasons why fish numbers decline. So to make so to say, no difference between whether they are scientists or whether they are experts for fishing, fish, savage treatment, and to take in their expertise as given. But I have to say a word about that. This is I'm always trying to develop concepts that are relevant for researchers, and this is a concept that specifically I think addresses natural scientists. Since like 20 years I always heard them talking about science and practice. That's how they organize science and management, or if you go to biodiversity people, it's always science and management, science and practice. It's like a dichotomy they use to organize their world, and with this kind of overlay of realms, we try to kind of get clearer about what happens here and what kind of realms are overlapping.
Okay, so we've got time for 2 more quick ones, up the back and then down here.
Thank you very much. It's Susie Goff from Culture Shift. Sort of building on that comment too, I'm just wondering, would you consider using creative arts like drama, poetics, music, even psychodrama, those kinds of more embodied ways of knowing and expressive ways of knowing to bring those realms together?
So what I would, do you mean in relation to science and practice? So that's where I'm still, I mean, it's not that old, this kind of picture, and that's where I'm struggling a bit, or not struggling a bit. I see a lot of disciplines basically falling into the category of practice to some extent. So I would probably system thinking, those kind of things, the arts, architecture, engineering, I think they have a lot in common with this idea of practice and not that much with the idea of science. And what happens in Switzerland, at least in the last 10 years, is that they are perceived as if they would be science. So people from the arts, from architecture, they have to write papers and read theories, which I think is a bit strange. But I think in the end it's not an institutional map. It's a map of what I would call thought styles. So they address the world in a specific way. It's not institutionally that this map does not work of the practice in science.
Okay, last one.
Gerald Midgley from University of Hull in the UK. I agree with you about definitions and the impossibility of creating a definition given the enormous number of contexts people work in and different methodologies and things. My concern with the way people work in trying to set definitions is that they tend to take the principles underlying their own methodology and say that's what transdisciplinary research ought to be. So it's a way of putting yourself centrally and excluding others. And you need some kind of way of describing what you do, but surely it should be the leanest definition possible. And for me, it's simply about what kind of research makes disciplinary boundaries irrelevant. So systems research is transdisciplinary because you end up defining and redefining systems, and that, in principle, can go across any disciplinary boundary. If you can keep it lean, and it's not necessarily about including stakeholders or any other thing that would include some and exclude others, other than excluding disciplinary research, obviously.
I think we did not, I mean, if you have seen ours on the first slide, that's not a lean definition, that's a rather complicated one, I know. What I think, I think you're perfectly right. I think one has to know the own definition, but one has also to know that there are others and try to understand how they relate to each other. I think that's what we try to do with the map of purposes. Yeah.
All right, that's it, buddy. It's great. It's magnificent. Hand clapping, please.